in Estonia, because in Estonia we have a saying that after saying Happy New Year after 6th of January, you should buy somebody a drink. So next time I'm meeting you, we will all have drinks on me. But maybe to start, I believe that this year has started with AI, and probably for all of us, as you know, AI regulation and AI governance has been I would say very much needed and also a hot topic. Tech Envoy has summoned or selected a high-level body on AI governance. I know that many countries' representatives are there from private sector and so on. They have come up, or they have made public their I would say midterm report. Yeah, I think it came out in December. Now they are starting consultations and publicity and contrary to what was expected, they don't adopt it or they don't aim to adopt it in January, but in August, together with the Digital Global Compact and the future of during the future of the summit. But we have also US that came out with UN AI resolution that is currently being discussed, and if everything goes as planned, it will be adopted in January 26. But these, of course, are just a few examples of how much AI is in the center of everything. And we met with Snyder last week in Davos. I would say that metaverse that was in the center of Davos last year has entirely disappeared from the scene and has given over to artificial intelligence that I think that rightfully so has worried many of us, because as any other technology, it can be used for not only for good reasons, but also for bad. But we should also not forget that it could bring a lot of benefits to all of us. Even though I have to admit that personally, I am not yet as avid user of these possibilities as I could, due probably to my place of work. But I think this more or less also summarizes our first session of this year, when we will hear quite a bit from different AI experiences from Singapore, Finland, also Estonia. My good colleague has agreed from digital side to be here, but also about the developments or several developments in the UN, because it is an important year as well as the next year for technology governance, but also internet governance. So I am really honored to welcome our first guest from Singapore, and to maybe just a few words to introduce, and we will hear about Singapore experience in AI governance. But if there was something that I really missed in this welcoming of the 2024, so May-Linh, please add. We haven't met also for a long time, so nice to see you.
Yes, thank you very much, Nelly. I am delighted to introduce Johnson Paul. He's a longtime colleague from Singapore. He presented at the Bangladesh AI plus Digital Public Infrastructure Summit, and it was so good and so thorough that I thought that I would like to invite him to present here. So without more ado, please, Johnson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nelly and May-Linh, for the kind introductions and for inviting me to speak. Allow me to share the screen so that everybody could see the presentation. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, Johnson.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I guess the topic of the day is AI, and governing AI may sound quite a bit of a contradiction, because there are schools of thought that believe AI cannot be governed. But I suspect we are in the school that believes it can be managed and governed. And if you look at the rankings across the world, Singapore ranks number 3, but it ranks quite low when it comes to government strategy. So I was part of the cabinet group of people in the ministry that did the Internet Cabinet paper in 1994. So I know the approaches that the government takes in terms of addressing a black box, you know. So at that time, when internet was not so pervasive, the Singapore government was quite bullish about addressing the challenges. But in the case of AI, it seems like they're tailgating the US for sure, and they are taking a wait and see approach to a large extent, primarily because it's more of a product than an infrastructure. And I guess they, being a small country, they prefer to see how it evolves and capitalize on the dividends that it yields. Now, Singapore ranks number 3, but very high on the search for talent, as well as the commercial and research applications that they want to develop for AI. So quite clearly, at the initial onset of addressing AI, and the first paper that came out on AI was in 2019 from the government, the IMDA particularly, which is the Infocomm Media Development Authority. And they focus on 7 pillars or sub-pillars. As reflected in this particular chart, the idea was to have an AI-enabled digital economy, and that was a thrust of the 2019 AI governance framework. And it places a lot of emphasis on human centricity of AI, a lot of emphasis on deployment and test bidding. Now, if you look at the chart on the right, I guess they have the sectoral focus very clearly defined, and they had pursued this quite aggressively. In a chart later, I will show what are the initiatives they have undertaken. But the model AI governance framework that they deployed focused a lot on largely the internal governance structures and measures. The real problem with this AI 2019 model AI governance is that it lacked enforcement, and it quickly evolved into a second document in 2020. But having said that, I think the fundamental parameters which the Singapore government and society looks at AI is that it's experimental black box, you know, and that AI has not only generative capabilities, but also degenerative capabilities, which we will come to discuss later. And they want AI to be as public as possible. And you'll see the term AI for public good. So that has been the 3 areas of significant focus for the Singapore governance AI model framework. Now, obviously, they were focusing on the digital economy. As at that time, internet, social media was still very heavily deployed, and AI was really at the fringe. But it's quite the contrary now in 2024. Very quickly in the last 4 to 5 years, we have seen exponential increase in AI applications. Now, in 2020, they evolved the 12 ethical governance principle in the AI governance framework. They call it the most viable product framework. Now, this was because many companies were already deploying AI tools, and they insisted on abiding by some ethical principles in the coding of AI machine learning. So that was the dominant theme in 2020. The document actually had highlighted 5 sectors, and they included a 6th, only because many of the sectors that are highlighted did not progress very well. In fact, what took off really was the 6th pillar, which was the government and finance. That took off quite early. A lot of efforts in the safety and security dimension also took off. Also, to a large extent fueled by COVID considerations. The remaining sectors, especially education, healthcare, took a backseat initially, but has now come to the fore. In the area that I'm most familiar with smart cities and estates, because of a lot of privacy issues, given that OIT systems are proprietary, it was very difficult to deploy AI systems that at the infrastructure level, and hence they lag behind in terms of the overall deployment. So this maps out in a very succinct way the key developments that took place since 2017. As you can see, privacy was a big issue in 2018, and there were several research programs. Over 500 million was invested, and there was targets for training of AI scientists and technicians. Again, there was an advisory council that focused on deploying standards for ethical use of AI and data. The first model AI governance framework was in 2019, but there was also a critical partnership with Center for Industrial Revolution in World Economic Forum that focused on responsible AI and exchange of standards. So Singapore government obviously was approaching this in a very collaborative fashion, because Singapore is really not a price setter, it's a price taker, and not the technology lead. So they were trying to learn from others. They created a AI makerspace, which was meant for SMEs, and a trusted data sharing platform. Now, the national AI strategy focused on 5 national projects, and I said, as I mentioned earlier, most of them failed except for Homeland Security, and to a large extent finance and government applications. But government also released a document on Government AI Readiness Index, which a lot of companies participated in. And that paved way for the second model AI governance framework in 2020. Again, here they were more focused on the 100 experiments. And I believe Mei Lin had met Lawrence Liu, who was championing the 100 experiments or the use cases that they were trying to develop and learn from, and then scale it to different industries. Now in 2021, you can see that the level of activity suddenly escalated, and there was a national AI program in government which focused on urban planning, largely on smart cities, and using intelligent technologies to be able to provide efficient facility management. Booking of venues, and about 56 million spent on hybrid artificial intelligence program by NUS and CNLS and A-Star, and also focus on largely on built environment. Now they realized that they were lagging far behind in the built environment in the use of AI applications. Likewise in education, the first attempt at AISG education program, about 55 students were enrolled and completed that program, and several other initiatives, including in the medical field, Selena for diabetic retinopathy. Now, if you go to any one of the public polyclinics or hospitals in Singapore, they are currently using Selena. So it's AI driven. Now, one of the interesting developments that took place in 2021 was Veritas, the toolkit for financial institutions, which was quite instrumental to scale the use of AI in the financial sector. Now, going into 2022, we saw about 2.6 billion investment for new applications, and this was largely in the legal, with the legal fraternity. Again, when I first broached this matter on AI for judicial proceedings in Singapore, I think there was a ruling before 2022 that disallowed AI applications. We had done a specific proposal for India because they were setting up a new arbitration center, and at that time there was already about 56 startups on in the legal tech space. Of course, needless to say, there are a lot more startups in the US, from arbitration to mediation to supporting the entire legal fraternity in the use of AI. Now, Singapore was lagging behind quite significantly in that space, and therefore they needed a critical injection, both for education as well as for the legal fraternity. Now, the interesting thing about 2022 was also that they set up a lot of sandboxes, and that provided a good test bed and testing ground for the application of new policies. But in 2023, the AI Verify Foundation was set up, and they were the prime movers of the draft AI model framework for 2024. In fact, the new model that is meant for generative AI was drafted by them and supported by the Infocom authority. So you can see that the industry has taken a lead in this space, contrary to the era of the internet, where government was taking the lead on several fronts. Now there was also a very aggressive. Sorry, I think. Oops. Apologies, I think I clicked too quickly. So in 2023, there was also a lot of collaboration with Google Cloud, because the government realized that they can't build their own cloud. Now, AI, as you know, is primarily driven by the big data, deep learning, and quantum technology. So there was a lot of efforts in 2023 to set the baseline, and A*STAR was directly involved in many of the collaborative initiatives. Singapore also partnered with the US. I think they have a AI Verify and NIST did a sync up in October 2023. So quite clearly, in my opinion, Singapore is not approaching this independently. They are adopting this in a swarm and sync approach. So this is the latest as of January 24. The tagline is a trusted AI ecosystem, and how to build public trust primarily for the adoption of AI. So there was an initial phase of building, embarking on AI in a very ethical fashion, but at this juncture, it is promoting public trust, and AI for public good, and international collaboration. So the premise of the new report, which is available online, focuses on developing a strong culture of innovation in the AI ecosystem, consumer safety, and public trust. Now, as far as quantum technology is concerned, again, Singapore is still getting NIST, and they have developed a whole framework for ex-ante and ex-post policies. Ex-ante as in developing safeguards, and ex-post as in developing safety nets. So that is where we are at this juncture. But if you see the evolution of AI governance, Singapore is also looking at a very risk-based governance, because AI is a black box, and degenerative AI can cause severe disruptions, especially in the infrastructure space. So the risk management framework is now being thoroughly studied and deployed in centers where AI is being developed and deployed, especially in public institutions where AI security robots and humanoids are being tested and tried. Now, this, of course, parallels with what the White House had issued late November last year on the safe, secure, and trustworthy development of artificial intelligence. Now, I'm coming to a close for the presentation, and I must say that Singapore attempts to tap into the 15.7 trillion potential of the AI in the global economy, and that too by 2030. But some feel that this approach that Singapore has taken is not positioning the country to be AI driven. Is very cautious, is treading on this very cautiously. But more importantly, I think the real question of how AI can be governed is still being debated. Now, there are many theories on technological singularity, and many feel that we are quickly approaching Epoch 5, where there's biofusion, because AI on its own is not intelligent, but if it interacts with human cells, which are intelligent, then we are talking about a new generation of AI robots or systems. But nevertheless, one must say that with the adoption of AI, it has accelerated the cycle of innovation, especially in the field of medicine. And I think some predict that the cure for cancer is, within reach this year. But the bigger question is whether we are crossing the AI Rubicon and whether we are reaching a point where humans cannot control AI. I guess that's where the essence of human centricity comes in, and to what extent governments should ensure that this is clearly and monitored. Some believe that there is a need to develop a satellite security system to be able to shut down AI systems from space. So there are new security frameworks that are being developed for AI on that front. Now, I guess this is a race to machine almighty, and some countries may have an advantage in reaching that destination. Singapore is, as I mentioned earlier, is really tailgating the US and to some extent China, knowing fully well that on the big data space in China, the likes of Huawei and others have unlimited access because they have no privacy rules around data, versus the West and to a large extent Singapore that abides by many privacy rules. And as you know, in 2019 we started with the PDPA document, emphasizing that permissions must be acquired for the use of data. So that ends my presentation, and welcome any questions if you have.
Yes, thank you, Johnson. I think we had actually a good question in the chat, really wondering whether there has been an evolution in understanding of privacy and the use of private sector. And if I misunderstood this, please, Catherine, correct. But could you comment simply these evolutions that you have seen, or perhaps the shifts in understanding of the privacy issues? Do you see that in ASEAN countries? You mentioned some of it related to China and so forth, that they still don't have privacy regulations, but it seemed at least that in Singapore and some countries there could be. So maybe you can comment on this.
Okay, in Singapore, actually.
Sorry, I just want to clarify the question just a little bit. And thank you so much for the presentation. You had noted that you had data privacy protections that were sort of built in, I think first around Veritas, then you had an evolution around sharing around financial institutions, and then you noted ASEAN had also then adopted sort of privacy. So it's just sort of how has the evolution over the time frame that you presented sort of evolved around what data can be shared when and how permissions are granted?
Okay, the PDPA rules are there. You're really talking about the ability to enforce it, which I think is where the weakness lies. And in Singapore, at least, it's a case of it's a case-to-case basis, and unless somebody complains, the use of data sometimes can be violated by companies. But again, in Singapore, the rules are clear and it's permissions based. Now, in terms of the evolution of thinking, I think you may have heard about during COVID that there was some data that was collected on the movement of people, right? And whether it was being used by the Ministry of Home Affairs for tracking criminal activity of some sort. So there was some initial suspicion about it. The team that put up Trace Together is a partner of my company, so we know them quite well. Technically, they are of the opinion that it's very difficult to trace individuals because it's using Bluetooth technology, and the data archives is actually in the hands of the private sector, and the Home Affairs will have to seek permission to do it, and they only do it if they have legitimate reasons to dig into that data. So it is not done intentionally or by default, like in China. They have data about almost everything, including the cars that are crossing traffic lights, but I think in the case of Singapore, it is as far as the Home Affairs is concerned, is on a case-to-case basis and requires the permission of the data owner. So there is a framework and it follows the ISO standards. You know, so there's a framework of data owners, data distributors, and data resellers. So that framework is very strictly applied, and all companies in Singapore will have to go through, must have a data protection officer. It's compulsory, and that data protection officer has to be trained by the government and certified. So, and this applies to SMEs. It's not just a requirement for the bigger companies. It applies to all small and medium enterprises. You know, so you will have to declare if you are hubbing or housing data, and especially if you are using, if you have a record of personal data, then you will have to go through a governance survey of that data and go through an audit. So I was partially involved in a Indian Chamber of Commerce for about 2 years, and there we have a lot of data about members, you know, their business activities, their engagements, a lot of personal details. So they were all of that was subjected to audit and scrutiny if we did violate, and any one member can take a class action against the association or against the company if they feel that the data has been violated. So back to your question on whether the evolution, it has evolved. Obviously, it's evolved. I think more people are open to sharing their data. For example, if you go to the hospitals, they do request if you could share your data for the purpose of experimentation, and they take you through almost a 1-hour session just to highlight to you the agreements on how that data is going to be used, you know, and the insurance against misuse of that data.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Johnson, so much for this. And of course, it's a very, I would say, timely topic around AI governance. There is so much going on, not only the UN processes that I mentioned, but as you also pointed out, different frameworks and so forth by different nation states and other networks and so forth. And there is quite a bit of going on in our chat, but I would suggest still keeping our time in mind to move, then perhaps also listen to some other governance examples that we will have later on from Finland and Estonia, and then maybe continue if we have time later, or as I said also in the chat. So I would like to thank you, Johnson, for your overview, and with your kind permission, we would move further to ITU, International Telecommunication Union, and we will hear about two different sort of lines of work. There was recently World Radio Telecommunication Conference, and Diana from the Spectrum Policy and Digitalization Unit will give an overview of what was happening in this actually very important event. So Diana, please.
Okay, so thank you so much. Thank you for having me today. So I'm going to share my screen here. So I'll do a short presentation for you on the WRC. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the World Radio Communication Conference. So it's a treaty-making conference that it happened last year, in the end of last year. Basically, what we do is to update an international treaty. So now we're moving a bit from AI to radio frequency spectrum and satellite orbits. I know satellite is a hot topic now. And our main objective is to ensure that these two resources of radio frequency spectrum and satellite orbits, they're used rationally, equitably, efficiently, and economically. And the services we're talking about here are mobile services, satellite services, maritime, emergency aviation, broadcasting, science services. Yeah. So all this that we're talking about, all this evolution in terms of AI, in terms of the internet, all that is relying on underlying services, some of which are cabled like fiber, and many of which are using radio frequencies like mobile services, like our mobile phones and other services, satellite services. Right, so this is just about the treaty itself, this international treaty that's updated every 4 years, just for your information. Examples of some of these services, as I mentioned, mobile services, and that independently of being in 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, and now we're working on 6G, that will also incorporate some aspects of AI. The satellite services that we have, geostationary and non-geostationary orbit satellites. So we've been seeing a huge expansion in terms of non-geostationary satellite orbits and satellite constellations being launched. Broadcasting service, aviation, maritime, there's also science services. So these are just some examples of topics that were discussed during the last conference. Basically, why do we need to regulate these services is because these are limited natural resources, both the spectrum and the satellite orbits. And we want to ensure that these services, they can operate without causing harmful interference. So if you have a service in one country, it doesn't mean that these radio waves are going to stop in the border of the next country. So this use needs to be coordinated to have an interference-free environment. We also regulate it to ensure that there's an equitable and efficient use of these resources so that all countries can have access to these resources and they can use them efficiently. Other advantages of having a global harmonized framework, which is what we have, is to have economies of scale, to enable international roaming, emergency communications, and to have some stability that allows for these massive investments that we see in terms of launching satellites and mobile networks, right? So just to give you an idea of the size of the event, almost 4,000 delegates of 163 member states were represented. And the final treaty was signed by 151 member states. So it's basically the whole world attending and trying to find consensus on these topics. Some of the outcomes of the conference, just to point some to you. So on this first block here, fixed mobile and broadcasting issues, I'll just mention the broadband connectivity, that it's something that's very much talked about. So there were additional frequency bands for what we call IMT, is like the bands we use for mobile phones. And there were more mid bands allocated for these services. And also the discussion on the 6 gigahertz band, which allows it to be used also for Wi-Fi. So we'll see more equipment in these bands, in these mid bands for IMT and for Wi-Fi. Broadband was also expanded in the satellite issues, was also considered there for use in the sea and in the air. So it's what we call the use in stations and aircrafts and vessels, connecting both with geostationary and non-geostationary orbit satellites. So this was also a discussion of WRC. Then on the scientific issues, we had two kinds of agenda items. So one discussion was on collecting information. So collecting information on scientific data, on either, for example, physical properties of the Earth or of the atmosphere, and relaying this information back to the ground. So this is one topic that is becoming more and more important, the use of satellites for the collection of this scientific data. And another colleague of the ITU will talk a bit about COP, but it's gaining more and more importance on the use of satellites for scientific data. And another discussion, another outcome of the WRC was then the allocation of frequencies also for aeronautical services, and that's to relay information from pilots to the ground and using non-geostationary orbit satellites so that they can cover also regions that are not covered today by the terrestrial networks. So these are some of the outcomes of the last conference that was held in the end of 2023. And we have set the agenda for the next conference in 2027. So the next 4 years, we're going to be discussing this agenda here. We'll be studying in the ITU and preparing for the next conference. Some topics that might be of interest to the group. One of them is we're calling here equitable access, and this is actually the topic of space sustainability. So you've probably heard these words before. So space sustainability, we started the discussion in the ITU in 2022, and it's become more and more a topic of interest to our member states on how can we ensure that the orbital resources, every country has access to them. How can we make it equitable? So using maybe something in between a first come, first served that makes it efficient, the use. And also, on the other hand, you have the planned bands where you have allocated spectrum for countries. So they're going to be discussing this on the next 4 years. So that's on the satellite side. Then another topic that you've probably heard about is direct to phones. So it's the communication of satellite services to our mobile phones directly. And this is also under discussion for the next conference. So specific frequency bands from what we call mobile satellite services. How can these frequency bands be used for this direct communication between satellites and our phones? There'll be several topics regarding science services that will be discussed for the next conference. As I mentioned, it's a topic that has gained a lot of importance lately. And some of these agenda items will enable us to gain more information on, for example, sea surface temperatures. And these measurements, they help monitor and understand climate variability and climate change. And one topic that is new to our discussions in the ITU are the lunar communications. So it's focused on space research. So nowadays, with all this discussion on space exploration, there's also going to be a framework for lunar communications. So how can these communications take place today for research, and in the future, who knows? So this framework could also be applied to other interplanetary bodies in the future. So this is going to be a bit of the discussion that will take place in the ITU during the next 4 years, just for your information. And that's a quick overview of what we did on the WSC 23 and what we're planning for the next 4 years. If you have any questions, I'm available to answer them. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Diana. There was a comment in the chat, but if anybody has a
Let
question,
me have a look. I didn't see any.
I understand these are always not so easy.
This is a huge issue, Diana. Thank you for flagging.
Yeah.
I have seen stats that indicate there may be filings for up to 90,000. Yeah. So in fact, what happens is that we do receive these massive filings. So there are some companies that plan to launch a huge number of satellites. It's not always the case that they effectively in the end launch all these satellites that they had planned. But some do send huge filings, and that's an issue both to process and also to coordinate with other countries. Yeah. Where is dynamic spectrum access in WSC coordinate considerations? If you want to be a bit more, you want to say a bit on
this
that?
is the question. Instead of having fixed frequency bands, the idea about being able to have shared spectrum and allowing, for example, a broadcast to sense what the busy part of the spectrum is, shift to another part of the spectrum, then shift back as the frequency becomes available. So instead of relying entirely on fixed frequency bands, working more on dynamic spectrum access.
Yeah, so that's something that has been adopted in some countries in some frequencies. It's not something that is adopted throughout the whole frequency spectrum. So US has adopted that in the 3.5 for example, in the CBRS bands. It is adopted in some cases, but it's not something that can be used just anywhere. It depends very much. Just to give you an example, for example, if we talk about frequency bands that are used for aeronautical, they cannot be, we can't use dynamic spectrum access on those bands because they have to have some kind of safety. If you're using them for route, it needs to have some kind of safety because there's safety of life involved in that, just to give you one example. And then if you have Earth exploration satellite services where they're actually monitoring, satellites are monitoring physical characteristics of the Earth. So in these cases, we need specific frequencies depending on the physical characteristic that is being monitored. So we also can't use dynamic spectrum access. So in some cases it can be used, other cases it cannot. It can be done nationally as it was done in the US. So not necessarily this has to go to an international conference to decide on dynamic spectrum access. This can be done nationally in specific cases.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
I suggest if we have other questions for now, we put them in the chat and then we can have continue our discussion in the chat. And we will now hear, thank you, Diana. We will now hear about the outcome of the COP28, also much talked about, and an essential policy line. And Robin from who's a program officer for Green Digital Action at ITU, will give an overview. Robin,
thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for giving me the floor. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm also sharing the screen, hoping you can see it well. All right.
I see yourself, but not yet.
Okay.
Somebody can help you to.
Maybe let me just reshare. Maybe that didn't work very well. Okay. Can you see it now?
No.
Strange, because for me it says that I'm showing it. That's very weird.
Schneider, do you have the presentation? Perhaps you could share.
Not from Robin, no.
Sure. Let me try just once.
Okay.
Yeah, now it works.
Now it works. Perfect. Sorry.
Perfect.
All right, fantastic. Let me just, can you see it full screen? No, probably, right?
You can, yeah, now it's full screen.
Fantastic, great, thanks. Sorry about that. Okay, speaking about technology. All right, so I just wanted to briefly speak about Green Digital Action at COP28, the outcomes and the next steps. And just because this is my first time in the meeting and I wasn't sure how much all of you know about ITU, I just wanted to give a very brief overview about our work on climate and the environment. So we have two strategic goals. First of all, universal connectivity, which is really all about closing the digital divide. And on the other hand, sustainable digital transformation, which is all about, which also includes addressing the dual climate and environmental crisis through the promotion and enablement of digital transformation. And this is really an important topic to go hand in hand with the first goal, because with the rapid growth of the digital society, greenhouse gas emissions, e-waste, and so on from the digital industry will continue to grow if circular and environmental considerations are not taken into account in the design, deployment, and decommissioning of ICT equipment and services. So ITU overall, we address these challenges from different perspectives. We're working on greening the digital transformation, on creating a circular economy, as well as on leveraging the positive impacts of ICTs. And Diana, of course, mentioned various aspects of the radio communications part for Earth observation and so on. But beside what our Radio Communications Bureau is doing, we approach this by improving the quality, collection, and interpretation of data on ICT sector greenhouse gas emissions, on e-waste. We provide technical assistance, research, reports, guidelines, standards on various items to really encourage the adoption of policies and strategies for the environmental sustainable use of pro ICT products and services. And which is most important for you to know is many of these, so the standards and these guidelines and so on are typically freely available on our web pages if any of this is of interest to you. However, unfortunately, we know it's not enough what we're doing, same as it's not enough what any one of us unfortunately is doing, because it's getting more and more challenging to reach the Paris Agreement goals of 1.5 degrees. So we need definitely more global collaboration, more and bolder action for the climate, and also for like other environmental issues like biodiversity, pollution. So what we have decided last year is to really leverage the convening power that ITU has through our global membership of 193 member states, and also more than 1,000 private sector, international organizations, and so on that are part of our membership. So we've done this by convening Green Digital Action already quite early ahead of COP28, so early 2023, with the objective really of increasing the global collaboration to advance digital technology-driven climate action and to co-create and fast-track practical solutions. And we really wanted to make sure that we're mobilizing concrete commitments for action. And because we wanted to ensure that it's not just about showcasing. I mean, of course, COP is an important venue, and we felt it was very important to bring the digital theme in a more coherent way to show that it has benefits, but also negative aspects if e-waste and ICT sector greenhouse gas emissions are not properly managed. We didn't just want to showcase existing solutions, but as I mentioned, we all have to do more. So we wanted to come with concrete collaborative new solutions. So we started early 2023 in shaping collaborative action. We brought together different organizations. It was a very open co-creation process throughout the whole year. And then we used COP more as the PR culmination of it to launch the first progress that we have managed to do. And then, of course, it continues now to ensure follow through and really to ensure that it wasn't just empty words. So officially, Green Digital Action was launched at COP28 through with over 40 partners from industry associations, governments, businesses, in a series of, in a rich program we ran throughout the COP28 days. We had breakthrough sessions, which were really intended to launch these official collaborative outcomes. But then we also had different partnership sessions where partners took the lead on specific agenda items that were key to them. But most importantly, again, rather than showcasing what we did, I wanted to share with you a few of the key outcomes that we managed to achieve. So a few outcomes across different pillars. So we had around 6 pillars, and 4 pillars specifically had quite promising outcomes. So on the greenhouse gas emissions pillar, companies agreed to set 1.5 degree aligned science-based targets and publish transition plans, which is good, but it should have happened many years ago. But it's a good progress that more companies came forward with this, as well as to increase transparency on emissions data across the digital community via a joint database. So the work that we have done through a regular yearly report on measuring ICT sector's greenhouse gas emissions really turned out that there's a lack of transparency in the reporting and also in coherence, specifically on scope 3. So it's fantastic that there was this agreement in making scope 1, 2, and 3 data openly available. Mainly, companies have agreed that they will make their CDP reports openly available if they don't do that yet through a database. Another good outcome was a joint statement by the World Standards Corporation, so ITU, ISO, and IEC, on the importance of sustainability being built into the technical standards development by design, so early on across the process. And of course, there are a number of like green, sustainable environmental sustainability standards, but this is really concerning all types of standards. And then we had another interesting outcome on standards. There was an action plan launched, which was developed by ITU together with private sector entities to strengthen industry and country collaboration on the implementation of already adopted environmental sustainability standards. So we're really hoping that this can accelerate and promote the importance of standards. Then there was a project launch on a cross-country collaboration to develop e-waste regulation in 3 countries. And the last issue was concerning the Early Warnings for All initiative, where under the leadership of GSMA, mobile operators pledged that they will support the Early Warnings for All initiative through cell broadcast and location-based SMS. And GSOA, the Global Satellite Operators Association, pledged to enhance direct-to-handset services. So these are all really nice outcomes. The next step now is, well, as I mentioned before, to ensure follow-through of these commitments. And we're really looking to bring together more partners for additional and strengthened actions. And maybe just to go into some of them. So this joint database, for example, there will be a set of standards coming out this year from ITUT on a database on ICT company level greenhouse gas emissions and energy use, one standard on a country level database for greenhouse gas emissions of the ICT sector, and a database on emissions factors. So based on these standards, specifically standard 1 and 2, and through these corporate agreements, we're really hoping that we can start to develop this database based on the standards, so that we can really start to have an interactive database where it's really transparently it can be transparently seen what is the ICT sector impact, climate impact on the national, but also on the global level. This is pending funding, but we're hopefully working on it very soon. And then to ensure follow through in the action plan, again, there we will be setting up regular peer learning working groups to ensure that organizations can come together in countries to see, okay, which standards are of particular relevance, how can we make sure that we break them down into easily to digest steps, also hopefully including SMEs that maybe don't have the means yet to go really into detail on very technical standards, and see how we can together ensure that they can be implemented. So as I said, also we're very interested to have more partners on board to strengthen green digital action and extend it. So anybody is invited to join Green Digital Action as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I completely understand the importance of this topic, but I'm afraid I have to ask to leave the questions to the chat, or perhaps in the future we can have a session also more focused on green issues, because we have some speakers still today. So thank you so much, and I would then continue actually with the AI, and if you have questions to Robin this time, please leave them in the chat, and she can answer. But for now, we would move on to Finland, and Konstantinos Kostas will introduce how Finland has approached and evolved in AI governance. So thank you, Robin, and I hand over to Konstantinos.
Yes, good evening. Hi, everyone. Depending on the time zone you are, good evening or good morning. I'm going to share my screen as well. And I'm gonna, can you see my screen well?
Yes, we can.
Good. Great. So I'm going to give you a brief overview on AI governance in Finland. Finland, of course, is one of the well-performing nations in various government rankings regarding AI readiness or e-government and so on. And now with AI governance, there's been, of course, it's on topic of the Finnish government in many ways. So behind the success for the digital transformation has been, of course, that there's a strong political support for digital transformation for Finland. Digital transformation cuts across political lines. So it has been like there's multiple, there's been parliamentary cooperation between consecutive governments. There's in general in Finland, there's been political will to reform public governance. There's a strong citizens' trust in government. There's emphasis on delegation. So when these AI governance initiatives have been taking off, mid-level managers have been responsible to lead the reforms. Then there's been strong cooperation within government and between government and private organization.
Konstantinos, could you do
Yes.
slide share, because we're actually seeing your entire screen?
Okay, good. Can you see it now better?
Thank you.
Yes. So yes, so one, and the Nordic countries are of course a peculiar case because they have long tradition of openness that has been easily combined different rigid data with the open government principles. And regarding people centricity, has been a model for governance in Finland since the 1990s already, and it's also been it's one of the key elements of the 2020 public governance strategy in Finland. But people centricity doesn't mean only regarding AI or digital transformation. It's general design principle for governance, where the aim is to expand opportunities to actually influence and encourage people to participate in policy preparation, decision making. So regarding AI regulation, what's the situation at the moment in Finland? There's no national law specifically on the use of AI in public administrations. So the laws and regulations that apply to public administrative also apply to using AI. In the current governmental program, there's multiple major digital initiatives that the public service to be available digitally to individual and business by 2023. Open, I think the year actually another one, but anyway, I'm gonna continue. There's an aim to open and using public data. There's emphasis on getting this identity for everyone, and the real-time economy. Now the EU and the AI Act is of course also bringing issues on the table for Finnish AI governments regarding the interoperability between the AI and national solutions. One thing that the government is emphasizing at the moment, that the distinction made with high-risk AI systems and other AI systems are, from a national perspective, systems are all high risk regarding health and security and so on. There's many use cases for AI in public administration in Finland. There's been document labeling, categorization. There's LLM supporting composing, analyzing text content, translation, quality control assurance to detect unusual worrying patterns in system user data. There's analysis and prediction of trends, and in healthcare and social welfare, using in different organizational forms in shift planning, preventive care, self-care, and diagnostics. Regarding AI governance as such, one important project was the Finnish National AI Strategy that's called Aurora. That was launched in 2018, and the AI Ethics Committee that was a crucial part of the program was in 2020 and 2020. The Aurora AI was kind of an inter-sectoral user interface recommendation engine that went through the 40,000 services that are in the Finnish Registry of Digital and Population Agency. People centricity was the central design principle of the project, but in the project it was translated as a live event thinking. So situation where you need different officials and service providers to solve your needs, and instances of this kind of life events were paperwork after death of relative, moving to Finland, beginning university studies, having a baby, and so on. There was multiple ethical issues and multiple technical issues that came up during the project, but it was a process of institutional learning, and civil servants themselves emphasized it was kind of, this experiment was kind of a normalizing AI. As now the focus is more on knowledge management, knowledge utilization, and not placing AI to a higher position, that it was maybe still in 2017, 2018, seen as a kind of this abstract force. One interesting element in the AI strategy was that there's no separation between state and non-state provided, that probed, however, various legal issues. So the ethical guidelines for the use of AI are being on the table, of course, for Finland. So the early ethical guidelines in 2018 and 2019 were very numerous and fragmented. So various NGOs, governments, and researchers are forming their own ethical guidelines. They're also quite individual-oriented, and the definition of AI was not properly done. So it was, the AI was not necessarily treated in its some kind of concrete context, but some kind of an abstract force of nature. And now what kind of takeaway was from the national AI strategy was various criticism of the previous guidelines that were overemphasis on individuals, and now kind of more community orientation has been emerging in Finland, as the previous guidelines were overemphasis on individuals. Now, as in Singapore, as in the previous presentation, the risk-based approach is taking off. Also, this is the approach that the EU's AI Act is taking. Now, when AI governance initiatives are formulated in Finland, they always emphasize the need for concrete examples or concrete contextualization of the project or how the AI is used, and more emphasis put on participation. One of the recent outputs of the AI governance has been the formulation of the digital compass and vision for 2030 AI governance. That is kind of this very holistic approach to develop AI governance in Finland. So AI governance has been on the table since 2018, but more and more emphasis put on also on international digital cooperation. Last year in June, the Foreign Affairs Council in Finland made a memo around this issue. So, and kind of formed various stances on Finland views and visions for international digital operations. Of course, Finland's approach here aligns a lot with EU and EU's role in AI governance, where the emphasis on human rights and in the development use of AI. Finland is committed also in the realm of AI to enhancing gender equality, developing the position of the most vulnerable of social groups, also, as well as narrowing the digital divide in a global level. Highlighting a strong common and value-based approach to AI, enhance relation, research cooperation, and building strong partnership with the projects and utilizing financial instruments in an effective manner. And Finland sees that the EU's global gateway strategy is an important part of strengthening EU's global role. Regarding digital diplomacy, there's also issue that's the government of Finland is working on at the moment. Finland maintains the importance of developing digital diplomacy on the EU level as part of European Union's foreign security, commerce, and development policy. that would align well with global technology development. Finland regards institutional development as a crucial matter for AI governance and recognizes that strong cooperation is needed in digital diplomacy. And this would need to occur in a multi-level, especially in the UN, of course, in the ITU, and in organizations such as the Freedom Online Coalition. In a recent discussion paper, Finnish government highlights 3 areas regarding AI governance, which are the promoting norms, standards, and governance of digital technology in line with European values and interests, fostering secure connectivity, data infrastructure, digital service globally with trust technology and suppliers, and ensuring better coherence between EU's internal and external policies through social cooperation between the Commission, the EEAS, the member states, and multi-stakeholder community. And the multi-stakeholder committee in general was in this discussion paper given a lot of importance. To conclude, the institutional learning has been that the AI is an instrument, not an actor, and a lot of the pre-existing or pre-AI rules, ethical guidance and principles are still very inapplicable, that the technology should be understood before it's used. Also, these accountability issues regarding AI due to the black box nature remain open. And that's why also there's a need for stronger cooperation and standardization in the international level. And of course, Finland, it should be emphasized, is a peculiar case as a Nordic country due to its long tradition of open government. In Finland, the citizens allow the state a view into their personal lives, and at the same time, the government grants them access to its information. This has been a centuries old of administrative tradition in Finland. And it's also interesting that in the 2021, the OECD labeled Finland a concept of the Finnish paradox, where there's a high trust on government in Finland, while there's a low participation in democratic decision making. But it's interesting to see that also this issue regarding AI also have put more emphasis on participation. Yes, but I think this is all for me. So thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you, Konstantinos. There have been very many interesting questions in the chat. But meanwhile, we were thinking that we would probably definitely take the AI and AI governance issues up again in our next session. So for now, unfortunately, we have only the chat. But Kate asked and many supported how do these national plans actually fit with the EU and now also the global plans that are coming. So we will take these important questions up next session. And if you don't mind, Konstantinos, we would move
Yes, of course.
to Estonia. And I do hope that you can also join the next session when we will discuss these issues more in detail. But May-Lin and Snyder and myself are always here, and we will let you know. But for now, Kristel, so thank you, Konstantinos, and Kristel, who is the Estonian Public Sector AI Project Manager, will very briefly, I hope in 10 minutes, to introduce Estonian experience, because we have still one more speaker coming up today. So thank you, and the floor is yours, Kristel.
So yeah, I can't see, but I hope it's okay now, and I also hope that you can hear me as well. So I'll try to do it very briefly, just a few words, and I'm not going to go into any detail at all. First of all, Estonia is a teeny tiny country, and if you don't know where it is, it's close to Finland. And so 99% of our public services are online. We also have a very good and secure digital infrastructure. We all have our own digital IDs, which is you have to have one, so it's compulsory. We generally trust e-solutions. We have a culture of innovation and adaptability because In the 1990s, we basically had to build everything from scratch. We, after regaining our independence, we didn't have anything, and then we decided to go for a digital country. We realized that being a very small country and having not that much money, we had to make wise decisions, and at the time we decided to go for digital solutions, which as we can all see, was a very good decision. We are quite famous for our unicorns, and of course we are quite proud of them. So whenever people talk about Estonia, they talk about Bolt, Skype, and so on. Unfortunately, when you look at Estonia, you see that it's a tiny country, and most companies actually have only one person working in the company. Often we call those companies like this one man and a dog company. And then, of course, it might not be very easy to use AI. So we have very small companies, and only 5% of our private sector companies use AI. However, in the public sector, we have carried out more than 130 different AI projects, because we are really practical people, and we don't want to regulate anything unless we know exactly how it works and what kind of problems it might involve. So having long documents telling you what to do and what not to do don't really help unless you actually know that these rules apply in your context and in case of those projects. And so our aim is a proactive and data-driven government providing personalized services. Just like Finland, we also actually do not have any specific regulations concerning AI. Because, as I said, we wanted to experiment first. We wanted to see what AI is actually all about and gain lots of practical knowledge so that we would know what to regulate, when to regulate, and so on. So we started in 2018 and put together this Estonia's AI Task Force report in 2019, where we talked about all the different opportunities and things we could do. Then we have different strategies where we talk about AI. So these are all links, and I guess I can share my presentation, and maybe Nela can share it with you as well. And then, of course, since we are in the EU, we also look at what the EU is doing and what their rules are. And then, of course, we also have different requirements for data exchange, data management, and cybersecurity. But when it comes to AI, we don't have a single rule how to do things. Then also, when it comes to AI strategies, in some countries, you have very long-term strategies for 10 or, I don't know, 15 years even. We as practical people, again, think that AI strategies should be more like action plans. So because it's very hard to predict what is going to happen within the next 5 years, or so 10 years seems impossible, because when you look back like 2 years ago, we didn't see the things that we can see and use now every day. So making predictions is not very hard. So we take small steps, and we have very short, basically these are like action plans. And we focus on the public sector, private sector. Obviously you need skills, so education and research and development, but also we have been thinking about all the legal requirements and making sure that the legal framework actually supports all the innovation here as well. In the second strategy, we also had to stress more about the importance of data and also the importance of trustworthy AI. And now currently we are putting together our, it's basically finished, but we are getting some feedback for our third strategy. And again, we have the same 5 different focus areas, but then probably the aspect of using AI in a trustworthy manner and making sure it's safe and and you can trust it, is really important. Then we've also realized that collaboration is very important. So we try to collaborate with between different sectors, but also we have taken part in different international working groups and so on. And then, of course, we need to also think about the AI infrastructure, for example, compute, and make sure we actually, if you want to make sure you are up to date and can do innovation, you need to have the right infrastructure there as well. And again, I have to say again that we are really practical people. So we don't like long documents. We like very practical solutions. So we like tools and very practical ways of supporting organizations. So we provide different training programs where we talk about trustworthy AI, online courses. We are trying to set up centers of excellence. And maybe one of the things that different countries find fascinating is the fact that we've put together this AI support toolbox where we provide different services to support different public sector organizations. So we offer morning seminars, brainstorming sessions, but we also provide sandbox services and different panels. And some more. So we have data tracker in place. So in Estonia, when you log into the state portal, you can actually see which different organizations have checked your data or used your data. You can give consent to different private sector organizations, for example, so they have the right to use your data and provide better services. Sandbox was already mentioned. We also have had a look at different countries and what those different countries have been doing. So we have had a closer look at Canada's algorithmic impact assessment. We're working together with the UK and we are actually testing out their algorithmic transparency standard just to see whether it would work in our context. We change things a bit and then try to apply them in our context. And right now, I guess we are just waiting for the EU AI Act to come out, and so we could see the final version, and then we could actually know what to do. And we have mixed feelings about it. So we don't want it to stifle innovation, but of course, obviously, we all know that we don't want it to do any harm either. That was a very quick overview. Thank you.
Thank you, Christel. You made it exactly on time, and I apologize from my side that we run a little bit late, but we will make it up all next time. So, Christel, you have to join us in a month's time. So, thank you, and we have still 10 minutes to hear about the digital planet from Bhaskar Chakraborty, if I pronounced it very well. I hope you have joined.
Absolutely. Yeah, Nelly, thank you so much for the invitation, and your pronunciation was absolutely spot on. So great to hear about all these perspectives on AI as we launch into, I guess it's not a new year anymore, but we're looking ahead into 2024 as a year when a lot of the dust from last year begin to settle into a few patterns. I'm not going to share my screen because I had a traumatic experience the first time I tried to share my screen, the first time I presented at this forum, and I had Windsurf acting as my IT help desk when we were trying to figure out how to get, and so that just left me so traumatized that I decided I will not be sharing any screen, but just share a few ideas about some of the issues that we are looking at Digital Planet, which is a research initiative at the Fletcher School at Tufts University, where we try to understand how digital technologies are shaping lives and livelihoods across 125 different countries at a variety of different fronts. Happy to talk further about, all the fun stuff that we are doing and what we are learning. But here, since the topic is about AI, which is the predominant predominant issue that's on a lot of people's minds. I thought I'd share a few things in terms of what we are looking out for in 2024 in terms of AI. The first thing I wanted to do was just share with you a recent piece that we wrote in December of 2023, mapping what I call the geography of AI. And this is primarily looking at how the emerging AI industry is shaping up globally and the implications that has in terms of, who's, so it's more than a US and China game, as we know. And so where those developments are and how those dynamics are playing out. The second set of issues that we are paying very close attention to is that 2024 is also going to be the largest year for elections around the world. At least theoretically, more people are going to be going to the ballot box than ever in human history. It's also going to be the year when AI fueled disinformation will have the greatest chances to at least get off the ground. And so this makes for a toxic mix. And the third element that we've been watching very closely is the fact that content moderation teams across all the major digital platforms have gone down dramatically. And this is true not just for platforms like X, it's true for the Meta platforms and all of those. So as you kind of bring these elements together, one issue that we are really worried about, and we are actually putting out a book on this subject called Defeating Disinformation, is going to be published by Cambridge University Press this year. Unfortunately, many of the elections will already have moved on by then. But an issue that we are really focusing on here is the limited content moderation teams are now going to be reallocated into parts of the world where the regulators are shouting the loudest. Which means it's primarily going to be reallocated to some parts of the United States, some parts of the European Union, maybe a few parts of the developed world, and perhaps countries like India that also shout very loudly. And which means the rest of the world where elections are happening and will continue to happen with a ton of disinformation is going to have almost no content moderation, put against it. And that causes a lopsided perspective in terms of how democracy plays out. In other words, democracy in the United States comes at the cost of democracy elsewhere. So this is a zero-sum perspective on AI resources that causes a lot of worry. So now I'll close with a third issue that I'm paying very close attention to, and I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on this topic. This third issue has to do with the impact of all these regulations that we're talking about here. And one of the themes that has also been noted in the chat is that these regulations are, they're all well-meaning. They all are founded on solid principles. A lot of groups have thought very hard about it, but they're all kind of being done in a fragmented way. So it's a patchwork quilt of regulations coming up all over the world, wherever they are coming up. There's some places which are still taking a laissez-faire approach. The United States, of course, has no legislation at the federal level, and a dozen states have rushed out regulations to try and stop disinformation in their neighborhoods and so on and so forth. So what this means is that we'll have a patchwork quilt of regulations for the foreseeable future, even within the European Union, by the way. And it has all kinds of implications for the structure of the AI industry. And the implication that I'm particularly worried about is that it is going to potentially feed into the tendency towards industry concentration in AI. I mean, as it is, we know that the AI industry is enormously concentrated. Much of the foundational models that are being developed are being done by a handful of firms, which are in turn being resourced by a handful of firms. Literally 5 major companies have complete control over AI development. It's NVIDIA, Salesforce, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are the biggest investors in the cutting-edge AI companies like Anthropic, Inflection, and OpenAI. And then there is Meta, which is sort of taking a bit of an alternative approach. And then there are the Chinese players. And after that, it's pretty much it. Now, if you think about what the implications are of all of these ongoing developments towards AI regulations, one implication is that the inconsistency of the rules across the world will mean that the smaller firms, which do not have the legal resources and other resources in order to comply with multiple laws, will face a much higher cost and potentially a barrier to entry. So we'll essentially be reaffirming the power of the already powerful. The second set of issues is this notion of red teaming requirements, which I think are very, very important requirements, well thought out arguments for it, both from the White House executive order and from the EU. Makes a lot of sense. However, this is a very different approach to identifying safety on digital platforms relative to what used to happen in the past, where tech startups would basically put out half-baked products into the system, and then the users would catch and report the bugs, and updates would be issued. Now, that preemptive approach, open source approach, is a cheap way of catching problems. And now the red teaming preemptive approach is actually very, very costly. The documentation is costly, the simulations are costly, and you actually need the access to a whole bunch of expertise, legal expertise, technical expertise, geopolitical expertise. Again, entrants and small firms are not going to have access to those. So another reason why there's going to be barriers to entry. Another feature of many of the regulations is the call for labeling and watermarking. One more issue which creates a problem for small firms. We already know that watermarking is not a foolproof process. Black hat hackers can quite easily bypass much of that today. And smaller companies will have a lot of problem being able to either catch these issues or being able to verify and vouch for outsourced AI models that they will be accessing. So a number of different ways in which regulations, the way they're emerging right now, is going to add to industry concentration. Now, I do have before I close, a few solutions just to kind of put for your considerations. Some of these solutions, of course, assume that the market will sort of self-correct on many of these fronts. For instance, there's a lot of hope on open source models competing with the big proprietary other foundational models. However, even the open source models are beginning to close up. So Llama 2 is a lot less open than Llama 1 used to be. So I'm worried about open source models. A second area of hope is that some of the other bottlenecks, such as in the chips area, which is a massive bottleneck already, Meta has stockpiled chips, and other countries and other firms are stockpiling chips. Well, there are new chip makers that are on the horizon. AMD is looking to challenge NVIDIA's monopoly. The Chinese chip makers are on the hunt. Amazon is on the hunt. So there's some hope that we might see some competition there. There is going to be competition already in the cloud space. And then our current focus on large language models, hopefully we will transition in the coming years towards small language models, through a process of knowledge distillation and other ways in which you have more tailored approaches to training algorithms and so on. But all of these market-based approaches are going to take time. They're not quite certain. So I do believe that policymakers and regulators around the world, potentially starting with the United States, need to pay particular attention to proactively negotiating with the major AI players. So I'll give you a few examples of models that they could deploy, such as looking at the example of the 1956 consent decree that involved AT&T and the Bell system and the regulators. Very similar situation in 1956 as we have today in AI. There was basically one monopoly that had access to much of the cutting edge technologies, and they preemptively opened up the intellectual property of Bell Labs to the outside world. So is there a similar set of preemptive negotiations that policymakers can have with the AI oligopoly that we have right now? We have public investment frameworks such as the Bayh-Dole Act, which essentially is a form of public-private investments in technologies. Again, something like that could be applied in the United States and elsewhere. Speaking of elsewhere, there's a model of digital public infrastructure, which is being championed by a number of different entities across the developing world. And the whole idea of digital public infrastructure is that there are public rails on top of which application providers and innovators can build applications. So can the governments basically require foundational AI models to be part of those public rails? Very much like what has been done in Estonia, India, and several other places where digital public infrastructure has actually taken hold. And one more solution idea is to think about progressive taxation principles, which is basically levying a tax on AI-generated revenue revenues, and those tax rates go up with the size of the company, with the amount of revenues generated, and that tax pool can be used to subsidize the entrants and the small players who have to pay a higher per unit cost in order to participate in this regulation-heavy industry. So a few ideas on the table, lots of issues to look at, and quite a few, obviously areas of, brightness, and then a few dark clouds on the horizon. So I'll just pause there because I've been talking for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I definitely appreciate the ending, that a lot of opportunities and a few dark clouds, because in these discussions that I am usually present, it seems to be only about dark clouds. So I'm glad for this positive note. Unfortunately, we do not have time for discussions, but I do hope that when we have our AI deep dive session in the next months, because as you said, many of what has started is about to wrap up, or at least there is a time to about to wrap up. So we hope to see you soon in our network. And thank you so much, and thank you for everybody else joining today. I was glad to see you here for our first meeting in 2024, and I'm very much looking forward to our next session. Mei-Lin, if you want to close from your side also, as you have put quite a bit of effort.
Thank you, everyone. We are planning a next session in which we will go deeper into some of the topics raised today. And I just want to thank Bhaskar for what I called a masterful coda, incredible, just wonderful sweep. And the ideas at the end were fantastic. The idea of digital public infrastructure for this is really brilliant. And thank you very much. Thank you, all speakers.
Thank you, and good. Enjoy your day or night.